So this is a quote from the great man in honour of the great man's great biographer, who's talking later this morning. Man is the greatest computer of them all, whose judgment, nerve, and ability to learn from experience make him unique. Is that true now? Yes, I think it's true now. It certainly was then. I think it will be true for some period of time to come. But I want to raise a very small but over the next 15 minutes or so. This is not a talk about widgets or uncrewed aircraft, drones, killer robots, that kind of thing. It's a talk about the extent to which AI can make a contribution to strategy. And on the theme of 80s kitsch, I don't know if you remember this movie, WarGames from the early 80s. I think it's 40 years old this year. I remember watching it in black and white on our TV, because that's what we had. My parents were holdouts against technology, so we had a black and white TV in the mid-80s. And in WarGame, a supercomputer is prompted by a hacker into, a teenage hacker, into starting or trying to start thermonuclear war. It turns out it was a little bit of a stretch of reality, but the Soviets did have a rather large computer that they were feeding information into, informing Yuri Andropov about the threats from the West. So it wasn't a million miles from the truth, but the movie version, the supercomputer, is artificially intelligent and has its own ideas about how to run the war. But it learns happily from the game of tic-tac-toe that there are no winners in thermonuclear war, and so it aborts its attempt to start thermonuclear war at the last possible moment. Inspired by the movie, I raced upstairs. We just got our first computer, my first computer, an Atari 800 for the dweebs in the room. It was connected to nothing, but I was convinced I was going to hack the Pentagon, and I wasted untold hours trying to talk to somebody, anybody. It wasn't happening. So how far away are we from that sort of Hollywood scenario? Well, happily, we're quite a long way away from it. But as I say, I want to just talk a little bit about the but. This is a quote from Carl von Clausewitz. Can't talk about strategy and war without dropping the great man in it. And I really like this quote as a good upsum of intelligence in the round. Animal intelligence, human intelligence, and machine intelligence. What's it all about? It's about taking action, that's why we have brains, but action on the basis of juggling probabilities and possibilities. And both humans and machines are engaged in that kind of activity. They go about it in very different ways for the moment. What's the big difference? Well, there are many differences, but the big difference I want to talk about is this one. It's the business of mind reading, of trying to get inside somebody else's head. And we heard about that before the coffee break as the essence of deterrence theory, trying to figure out what the other person wants. This is the other name you have to drop in every strategy lecture. This is, of course, Sun Tzu. Know the enemy, know yourself, and you need not fear the result of battle. That's a pithy summation of the idea that you need to figure out what other people are thinking in order to work out what you yourself should do. And also, nice twist, emotional intelligence, you have to try and figure out what you yourself are thinking, what you yourself want to achieve. And we've evolved a particular type of intelligence to do that, an intensely social type of intelligence that's constantly going, I know that you know, I know that you know. These are the Dani people of Papua New Guinea from the 1963 documentary Dead Birds by Robert Gardner. It's an astonishing movie, and you can see pitched battle between these hunter-gatherer people who haven't had much interaction with the West. And I and other scholars, Richard Wrangham at Harvard probably most prominently, have posited that war, conflict, plays a large part in shaping this sort of social intelligence, the need to coordinate with others in this dangerous environment. There was enough threat around in human prehistory to make it worthwhile to gauge what's going on in other people's minds and how far you can trust them. That's not the only reason why you might want that social intelligence. So Sarah Blafford-Hardy says, for all the parents in the room, the biggest selection pressure was trying to figure out what your child wants, and also trying to figure out who you could trust to look after your child. It takes a village. So there are multiple rationales for developing this sort of social intelligence, but one of them is strategic, trying to figure out what to do in conflict. Well, machines don't do that. You all know what's going on here, I'm sure. This is AlphaGo beating the world Go champion Lee Sedol as far back ago in ancient history in AI terms as 2016, so 7 years old. And if you haven't watched it, the documentary AlphaGo is a brilliant, very dramatic retelling of that story. AlphaGo was not engaged in mind reading. It was doing a very sophisticated job of number crunching and learning from patterns, learning from games it had played before. This is interesting. The referee of that match, the first person to be beaten by AlphaGo in the warm-up, the European Go champion, himself no mean player, said this. There's a moment in the film, by the way, the first time that AlphaGo crushes Lee Sedol, who retired soon after this contest. Lee Sedol's eyes flick up to the chap sat opposite him across the other side of the board, just as you would do against a human adversary. I know that you know, what are you thinking? The guy on the other side of the board is just there, he's an employee of DeepMind, he's just there to move the pieces. He's like, it's not me. And Fan Hui, the referee, said this in the documentary: with human players, you exchange feelings. It's a dance of minds. But with AlphaGo, you feel nothing. And so you find yourself looking into a mirror and back at yourself, and all your doubts are reflected back at you. And that was a problematic moment for him. So, as my mother always asked me, where's my autonomous car? The problem isn't sensing what's going on the road, the streets, the rain, the buildings, and all the rest of it. It's this dance of minds that's stopping Elon Musk's vision from coming to reality. This is an attempt to get round that dance of minds by Jaguar Land Rover. They stuck some eyes on the front of the car that would track what pedestrians and other drivers were doing. The eyes aren't for sensing, they're for communicating to the humans. It's an ersatz version of theory of mind. It's a faked, cooked up version of theory of mind. I don't know whether it's ever going to be a practical proposition. This is a prototype, but it's an interesting way of recognizing that problem and getting around it. Thomas Schelling, to drop a third strategic theorist, liked to liken strategic confrontations to traffic, to a busy junction, to drivers jostling for position and figuring out what's going on in other minds. So this is Jaguar Land Rover's attempt to shortcut that problem, but it's limited. It's not going to help you really get inside the other mind. Can machines do that? Is that a forlorn hope? One last quote for you. Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent, from the enigmatic Ludwig Wittgenstein. And he's talking about the connection between language and reality, speaking and what's out there in the world. And the question is, the reason I have an but is to do with the very fashionable turn that AI has taken into language models. How far does language get you in understanding what's going on in the world? Is language enough to model what's going on in other people's minds? Clearly, for humans, there's more involved. We have an emotional component, an empathic component, a gestalt component of modeling what other people are doing. For example, we do all sorts of crazy things that go beyond language. If you shake somebody's hands, studies show that within 20 seconds, your hand's up here, sniffing your nose. Why is the handshake? What is the handshake for? One theory is that it's a mode of trying to gauge what's going on in somebody else's mind through the sense of smell, through the use of pheromones. Well, that's very far removed from language. But language gets you some of the way. Here's a conversation I had maybe 2 years ago with GPT-2. It was getting into exactly this. How good are you at intuiting what other people are thinking? This is me. And then the machine, I'm very good. How do you do that? I'm observant, and I've got experience reading people. I also have a lot of empathy. This rang a bell with me, because no, you don't. So I said, isn't empathy biological? You're just pattern matching language, aren't you? And I was very much of this view then and now that that's, on one level, that's what's going on. It's pattern matching language. But then it drew me up short and said, I think empathy is a skill that can be learned and developed. So is that true or not? Is there an emergent phenomenon that comes from scaling these neural networks that produces a different quality of cognitive activity than you would get from just pattern matching words? Well, recently some papers have started to emerge. People are doing psychological experiments with language models to try and answer this question. It's one of the most interesting aspects of AI research at the moment. A paper as recently as 3-4 weeks ago ran a battery of theory of mind, false belief tests of the sort that developmental psychologists would give to small children to see if they were developing in the right way or if they had some cognitive issues. For example, Asperger's. People on the Asperger's spectrum struggle with these tests at a young age to pass these theory of mind tests. The machine aced it. It understood that other people could have false beliefs and that it could exploit those false beliefs to its advantage. That's GPT-4, which is the current state of the art. GPT-2, 3, ChatGPT, Bard, they don't ace it. So this emergent phenomenon seems to be a product of that particular language model. That's quite interesting. Another one suggesting that there's emergent phenomenon here. Am I doing okay?
Yes.
Thank you. It is, if you prime a human with anxiety, they judge risk in a different way. This is prospect theory for those who are interested in Cannon and Tversky's theory. If I make you anxious, your tolerance for risk changes. What about if I make the language machine anxious by priming it with anxious text? Yes, it becomes more risk averse. So there's an emergent phenomenon going on there. Now we know that language machines are prone to going off the deep end, crazy hallucinations, producing nonsense. Students who use it to fake their essays are undone because it invents references that don't exist in journals that it's just cooked up on the spur of a moment. This is a problem for researchers, but one way they're finding to address that is to have a conversation among a group of language models where they'll each assess what the other language model has produced and try to come to some agreement as to what's right about it, what's wrong about it, and can they produce a more refined version. This is a dance of minds between the language models to an extent. I find that quite interesting. Where does it leave us? Noam Brown is one of the perhaps less well-known geniuses of our time. He was instrumental in producing a poker playing AI in 2017. Poker is a very challenging toy universe to solve, more challenging than Go, I would say. It's asymmetric information. It involves a degree of chance and uncertainty. Expert human players have traditionally tried to engage in this dance of minds, looking for tells, trying to gauge what other people are doing. They've moved away from that and try to follow a more mathematical approach to solving poker. And that's what Noam Brown was able to do with his computer in 2017. This is his latest project. It was done for Meta, Mark Zuckerberg's company, and it's another board game. It's the game of diplomacy. I don't know if you had a misspent youth and spent the 80s playing this. It's a little bit like Risk, but it's a conquer the world game. There is an element of natural language involved in it. You don't just roll the dice and move your pieces. You have to converse with the other players, multiplayer game, and try and persuade them to ally with you or betray other people, or it starts to look a little bit like a simplified version of strategy in the real world. And recently, Meta's Cicero algorithm has started beating expert diplomacy players online, using its tactical acumen around the board, but also using its conversational ability to fool them into forming alliances that it wants to ally with. I find that fascinating / slightly disturbing, but that's where the state of the art is now, and that's the reason I have this slight but. Some of you may have heard of the company Palantir. Palantir has recently started producing demos where language models are a component of its software for battlefield management, battlespace management. So you can use natural language inputs to move bits and pieces around the battlefield, or the machine can automatically move bits and pieces around the battlefield and communicate to you in natural language what it's doing. So you start to see a connection between language models and the real world of strategy, not just the board game people playing in their bedroom. And it's for that reason I return to WarGames and its far-fetched vision of the future. And I don't want you to leave you the impression that I'm some sort of technological determinist evangelically saying the end is nigh. We're a very long way from that, but we are at a really interesting junction in AI research where surprising emergent phenomenon are appearing as a result of scaling systems and having them communicate with each other in language. And that, I'll leave there.
Thank you. Thank you, Kenneth. Today we have artificial intelligence as a kind of tool. It does what we tell them, but quite soon we will have artificial super intelligence, and will we end up, human beings, being the tool of artificial intelligence because the systems are more clever than we are?
Impossible to answer. I don't know,
I know.
And I'm going to be wrong about it, but it is the question of the day, isn't
Yes.
it? And it's the one that's getting a lot of attention in the media in the last couple of weeks. congressional testimony by the guy who runs OpenAI. He's been in Downing Street addressing exactly this sorts of questions. We don't know. All I would say is we have a tendency to anthropomorphize the issue, to assume that to judge the intelligence that is emerging along human lines, and in many respects it's going to be very different. So people say, is it going to be super intelligent? Mm-hmm. Artificial intelligence already is super intelligent by the human yardstick in many dimensions, and super dumb in other dimensions. So in all the spaces of possible intelligence, we occupy a very small space, and I would say that whatever does emerge will look very different to us. In terms of putting us in a zoo and ending human civilization or not, I really don't know. My own suspicion, and maybe it's confirmation bias on behalf of humanity, is why would it want to? It's not part of the game of natural selection in the way that we are.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.